Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on Masechtas Nazir, we are on Samich Aleph Amud Aleph by the new Parak, new Mishnah. Hakusim ein lehem nazirus. Hakusi, which is generally translated as a specific group of people, was a question if they're Geri Arayos, Geri Emes. Over here, we're translating Akusi more generically as Ovid Kachavim. Those who are not of the Jewish faith, ein lehem nazirus, there is no nazirus, it's not chal upon them if they would do such a thing. However, nashim v'avadim yesh lehem nazirus. However, when it comes to women as well as slaves, they are able to accept upon themselves the dinim of nazirus, as of course we've learned throughout this Masechta about nashim, about wives, that they're able to make themselves into nazir that we had. Now the Mishnah concludes and says, even though women and avadim both can become a nazir, there is a distinction. And in a certain regard, we're more strict when it comes to women. Es avdai. Now what does that mean? So the Mafarish says like this. Sha'eved shenader benazir. If you have a servant that made a vow, saying that he's a nazir, the master is able to still force him to drink wine. However, a husband cannot force his wife to drink wine if she makes herself into a nazir. Kivan shenadra, once he heard she made a neder, v'shamala, and he heard about it, below Hafer law, and he didn't do anything about it, he didn't protest. Shuv inu yachol hafer. That's it. He's not able to protest. However, the way that the Taisa says, kaifas avdo means shemoiche al nazirusai. He has the ability not to have him do an avera by drinking wine, but basically he could have the nazirus removed basically at any point. However, when it comes to a wife, no, it's only you have that small window of time, and then afterwards, that's it. Afterwards, the din is that you now have your wife who's is a Nazira, and that's it. She's now has those laws. And then it says, Ve'eno kaifa es ishto. So that's what the Mishnah says, Shu kaifas ando ve'en kaifa es ishto. Question 9. Mahu chamer b'nazirus nashim mivavadim. So that we just saw. And then we're going to see in next Mishnah, Samach Beis, Amud Beis, the second half of this question, Mahu chamer b'nazirus avadim mivanashim. There's actually a way that we're more strict by avadim, but that we're not going to get to that point until tomorrow's daf. And this also is the same question, TB7. So this is a question that will extend beyond this daf. So says the Gemara, Katani hakusim ein lehem nazirus. Someone who is an Ovid Kachavim, there's no din nazirus by them. So mina hanimili. How do we know that that's in fact the din? So the Tanur Banan, the pasuk says, Daber el bnei Yisrael, and the pasuk in its entirety, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yamar delhem ish o isha ki yifla linder neder nozul hasal Hashem. So the pasuk clearly says Isha. So obviously the pasuk is explicit, it's beferish to include nashim. So how does it exclude Ovid Kachavim? It's because it says Daber el bnei Yisrael v'lo Ovid Kachavim. It's nafki yidin, but not Ovid Kachavim. So v'yamart alehem is a rabas hasavadim. The extra words of v'yamart alehem comes to include avadim. Okay, now on this Taisus wonders, why do we need even a miyut? We know that when it comes to all mitzvos, an Ovid Kachavim is not mechuyev to keep kosher, to shake a lulav and esrog. So why would we need a miyut over here? So Taisus warns this kasha and says the Ovid Kachavim ein lehem nazirus halo b'shar nedarim dinan ki Yisrael. Because it says ishish l'rabos Kachavim shenadu nedarim and nedavos ki Yisrael v'hachanami nadarhu. So because the notion of a neder is so similar to a nazirus, so we know that when it comes to Kachavim, they could make a neder, and they could make nedarim and nedavos, and they'd bring karbanos to the Beis HaMikdash to that extent. Even though it's not Kachavim, we still accept their sacrifices. So you think maybe also there'll be a din nazirus by then. That's why you need a miyut. So the Gemara asks the following question. Okay, so we said so Rabbi says avadim. So lamli kra ha marta. Why do you need this pasuk this riboy? We know kol mitzvah sheisha chayeves ba eved chayev ba. We know that there is this duality, this common link, that any mitzvah in which a woman is mechuyev in, namely mitzvah sosa say or mitzvahs say shloz man grama, which women are chayev to do, the same din applies to avadim. So therefore, why would we even think to need this pasuk? L'chara, it's a davar pashut that they're obligated to do nazirus. If we find that when it comes to nazirus, they have a riboy to include nashim, so that's it. Avadim, nashim and avadim usually linked. So Rava says, no, you can't learn that cleanly, because you need another riboy. Because shani hacha derakra, the pasuk says l'asr Yisrael nashai. Regarding the dinim of nazirus, the pasuk says in its entirety, ish ki yider neder Hashem. When a person makes a neder, or yishava shvu, he makes an oath, l'asr Yisrael nasho, l'yachal davar. You're not allowed to go against or profane your words. So a person has to do as he said. Now it says l'asr isra al nafshay, that you make something forbidden on your soul. So says the Gemara, this is TA6. The question for TA6 is lamli kra the avadim yeshem naziris hakol mitzvah sheisha chayeves ba even chayev. So it's based on this, because it says l'asr isra al nafshay, it's a mishin nasha kanuyaloi. It's not because someone who's basically in control over his life. He's not in control of his nefesh, and therefore, since he is not in control of his life, which is part of the whole pasuk, Nazir namilo kamashmulan. So that's why you would actually think not. That's why you need this extra riboy to tell you no. The din is that when it comes to an eved, yes, there are din nedarim and din nazirus. Omar daber al bnei Yisrael v'lo v'kachavim. The whole heichad echsiv Yisrael of kachavim lo. Is it true that anytime we say the word Yisrael, it's a miyut to exclude of kachavim? V'gabi erchen. When it comes to the dinim of erchen, which a person accepts upon himself the value of his value, depending on his age and gender, or that of someone else, and that amount will be given to the Beis HaMikdash. Dechsev daber el bnei Yisrael. So it says bnei Yisrael, which would seem to exclude of Chachamim completely. But Tanya bnei Yisrael marichen, v'ein ha'mikachavim marichen. So there's a din erchen that only a yid can make this declaration. When it comes to erchen, we say that an akum can be the subject of erchen made by Yisrael. So it has to be made by Yisrael, but he could still include by focusing on, I will give the value of that of kachavim. Now, if it's true that the whole pasuk is daber el bnei Yisrael is to exclude of kachavim, then l'chara you shouldn't be able to do that either. But nonetheless, we see that an akum can be the subject of erchen made by Yisrael. So shani hacha diamer kral aviv imo lo yatama. It says that this is different because it says in the pasuk that your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, you can't become tummy with them. When you have a din nazirus, you cannot even become in contact with the dead of even your zayin krov, even your closest relatives. So why does it say lo yatama? So this is the drasha. B'mi sheish lo av. Only someone who has a father. Yata av kachavim she'en lo av. Excluding av kachavim who does not have a father. Now, what does that mean? He doesn't have a father. So the Gemara asks this. Lamai. In din Yerusha, are you telling me of Chachavim that there's no din Yerusha and therefore collecting from his father who died? The Yomi Rabbi Chia Barabban Rabbi Yochanan Chachavim Yarish Asaviv. The Bar Tarish never ki Yerusha Esav Nosati as Har Seir. We say that's not true. We see that in fact an Oved Chachamim is Yorish from his father. So how could you tell me that an Oved Chachamim doesn't have a father? What does that mean? He does. It's in Yerusha. Ella, it means Remi Shemuzhar al Kibud Aviv. When it comes to the obligation of Kibud Avim, it's only for Yid. Only a Jew has the commandment of Kibud Avim. However, an Akum doesn't. He doesn't have the requirement, halachically, to have to honor his parents. And therefore, since he doesn't have this obligation to honor his parents, so therefore we see that it's different over here, that it shows this this connection by Nazir. So let's look in the Mefarish. Shani hacha gabi Nazir ma'asheinu b'toras Nazir klal. The reason why we say when it comes to Erechin he has some shaychus. When it comes to Nazirus, he has no shaychus at all. Dimakra la'aviv v'imo yatama mimi sheishol av dibur hakosef. It's only someone who has a father. Shuchai b'toras Nazir. Only someone who has a father has a din of Nazir. What do you mean he has a father or doesn't have a father? It means regarding the dinim of Kibud Av. Says the Mefarish, L'avli ima b'mishim muzar al Kibud Aviv ba'alacha hakasav leimer shlo yitama b'shvil nazir sh'olav. So even though you have an obligation of honoring your parents, since you're a Nazir, you cannot become tummy to them. However, when it comes to Oved Chachamim, hoyel ve'enu b'chibud aviv in nazir schalav. So since there's no obligation of kibud, so there's also no din nazirus. So you're right. Even though there are some times that even though it says daber b'nei Israel, and you would think that comes to exclude Oved Chachamim, but it's not really completely excluding like by din of Erechin. Ma'ashenkin, when it comes to the situation when we're dealing to a Nazir, Oved Chachamim is excluded entirely. Fine. So that is the explanation. But Misha Muzar al Kibud Av. Miksiv, Vertigamar, Miksiv, Kavid Avicha, Gabi Nazir. I don't understand. What it says doesn't mention honoring your parents by Nazirus. So what is the connection? El Omer Kro Aviv Imo Yatama. So what does it mean? Your father, your mother, you should not become Tami as a Nazir, but Misha Tuma. That's only someone who is Shaykh to Tumas. We continue Samach Alvam and Beis. Yota V'Chavim She'en Lo Tuma. However, when it comes to an akum, there is no tumah. Says the Mefarish on the top, Shim nag b'meis in a tameh. If a non-Jew touches a mace, he does not become tameh. So Manon the leisahu tumah. How do we know that's true? How do we know that Oved Chachamim doesn't have din tumah? Jermakra, the pasuk says, and the pasuk in its entirety reads, V'isha asher yitama, person who becomes tameh, v'lo yischata, and is not purified. So you can get kares because you became impure by the mikdash. You weren't sprinkled upon by the mechatos, and therefore you are tameh. Now, so what do we learn from here? The pasuk says, so it says that this person is potentially going to get kares. It's only referring to someone who is part of the congregation, which is excluding Oved Chachamim, who is not considered to be in the kahal as part of the congregation. So mamai dilma karisu dilo machayev. Maybe it's just telling you that an Oved Chachamim who becomes tameh will not get kares by going in the mikdash and the like. Avol etzmui matamo. Maybe there still is a din tumah by them. Maybe it just means they don't get nenachav kares. So Omer Kra v'hiza hatahar al hatameh, that the pure person will sprinkle the mechatas, the parduma ashes on the pure person, on the impure person, and the pasuk says that's done b'yom hashlishi b'mashvi, on the third and seventh day, and then v'chimis begadav barachatz b'mayim atahir ba'arev. He washes his clothes, he immerses himself in water, and then he's purified with erev shemesh after the sun sets. So what's the diuk? Kol sheish lo tahara yesh lo tuma. Kol shein lo tahara ein lo tuma. Interesting. So it's this paradigm of how a person can go so high, that person can also fall so far. So it's only someone who's shaykh by tahara has tuma. But so it says you can become pure. So it's only someone who's shaykh by tahara, there's a din tuma. But Chavim, where there's no din tahara, there's also no din tuma by them either. Ve'ema tahara hu havila. Maybe there's just no din tahara, but tuma havila. So how do we know that they go hand in hand? Maybe you're right. Maybe a Chavim doesn't become pure, but who says they become impure? So Amar Krav Ish Asher Yitama V'lo Yischata, and that's where it ends. So how does that answer the question? So let's look at the Mafarish. First of all, the Ramaskal V'dilma Tahara Hu Del Leisle Shim Kibel Tuma. If they accept Tuma, I feel Shehuza, and even if they're sprinkled, Lo Nitar Mitumasai. Maybe their Tuma never gets removed from them. Upaisal Sakadashim, but Magai can pass Kashim by touching it. Hatuma Havila. Maybe they could become Tame. Shim Nagba Mace. If they touch a dead body, Shoot Tame Matama Adavikalim. So maybe it has the din, like he's an avatoma, and he touches an adavakalim, he comes to rishon latoma. So maybe that the same din when it comes to for an avakachavim. So on this, Mefar says no. Amar kra isha shiritam avul yischat. What is that? So iskish tumul tahara. We see clearly there's a hekesh, a comparison between purity and impurity. The turvayu tumah v'tahara Kamishtoy. They're both talking in the same area. B'chad gavra in one person. V'hachimashma kol mi she'esh lo tahara ein lo toma. So kol mi she'ein lo tahara ein lo toma. V'chavim halavi esher lo b'tahara ein lo toma. Since it's impossible for them to have tahara, which is an interesting language, so there's no din toma. Says Taisus, v'chavim ein lo tahara d'chsev v'hoisel adas b'nei Yisrael mishmeres l'mei. So the reason why it's not shaykh, Tosfos helps us out over here and says it's because the pasuk Dafka says by Bnei Yisrael to mishmeres, but not for Chachamim. So they're definitely not shaykh by tahara, and therefore we make this hekesh. They're also not shaykh by toma. So therefore, because they're not shaykh by toma, so going full circle, so this is the reason why they're not going to fall under this whole category of a Nazir who is not allowed to become tamei for his relatives, like his parents. So the reality is, they're not musar on this. They're not obligated to have to honor their parents, and therefore there's no issue as far as them becoming tamei for them. And there's no issue as far as the din of Nazirus either, because as we said, the whole notion of Nazirus is directly tied to this element of becoming tamei. That Nazir is not to become tamei, but they're allowed to become tamei, just like they're not allowed. There's no din tahara, there's no din tumi either. Okay. Rav Acha bar Yaakov bar Meshani Hacha. He says differently. He says it's different over here because the pasuk says like this. Yomer Kra. And this is what the whole pasuk says. When it's chalta moisam of nechem achreichem, so the inheritance, l'reshes achuza l'oilum behem tavoidu, that these avadim shall work for you forever. V'acheichem b'nei Yisrael ish b'achiv lo tirda bo befarach. However, the brethren of one Jew to another shouldn't work excessive work. So what do we learn out from this pasuk? When it's chalta moisam of nechem achreichem, kol sheish lo nachla. There's a link between people who have inheritance or shaykh to a nachla, and specifically, let's say nachlas Eretz Yisrael. So there's a din toma. So this is addressing the point again that an akum is completely excluded from the zirus. Fine. So if we look at this Tosfos regarding that there's no din Yerusha for an akum regarding giving over avadim to his son. So if we look over here, this is what Tosfos says of avadim koi. Rav Acha ba liyashiv drasha shel aviv dil'el. He's trying to explain this whole notion of what does it mean about your father, honoring your father. What does that mean? When it says there is a father or not a father, it has to do with the din of Yerusha. What does that mean? Verishas avadim. Mefareshas bekra demisachaltem. That has to do with if you are an owner of an eved, then you can pass over that ownership to your son. However, Avid Kachavim will not be Yarish his Eved to his son. she'ein lo avik hachavim kinyan begufa eved, because he's not kind of the actual guf, the body of the eved, like a yid is, and therefore an avik hachavim could own an eved. However, it's not a kinyan guf. It's like kinyan paris. He can benefit from his work and his service, but it's not enough that the child will then be able to yarish. And therefore, that's what it's coming to tell you. There's this link between how it's not shaykh for an avik hachavim to be able to give an eved over to his son, and just as that is the case, as the Gemara says, kol she'ein lo nachla ein lo tuma. So there's no din tuma either. So that's the link between them. Okay, so let's quickly look at question 10, even though we're in the middle of sugya. Bama leisa Yerushal ben Ma'aviv akum midaraisa umahatam. So we said it's referring to avadim kivan she'ein lo av gufa kinyan haguf boy. He doesn't have a kinyan haguf, so he doesn't give it over to his son. Obviously, then we shouldn't include avadim. Avadim should not be within the category of Naziris for the same reason. When it comes to Erechin Shnamar, it says, B'nai Yisrael, Marichin, V'nei Chachavim, Marichin. That an avik hachavim doesn't have the ability to make a decoration to give a specific amount through Erechin. You would think that there could not even be the subject of Erechin, namely that a Yid can't look at Avik Chacham and say, I want to give his value. Talmud number Ish. So we learn out from there as a drasha, something Ish, something we remove the Ish. So when it comes to Erechin, it's split, right? By Erechin, certain aspects of Avik Chacham, yes, certain things that Avik Chacham, no. Hacha, when it comes to a Naziris, B'nai Yisrael Nazrin umavin carbon. B'nai Yisrael can become a Nazir, and then eventually they bring karbanos. V'ein ha'avik hachavim Nazirin umavin carbon. However, Chachavim, they do not become a Nazir, and they do not therefore afterwards bring a carbon. So these two are connected, becoming a Nazir and bringing a carbon. So an Akum is completely excluded from Naziris. You can't split it. Yachal Aflo Yehu Nazirin Klal. You would think they can't be Nazirim at all. Talmud Lemer Ish. So you can't say this. Amri imishim carbon la mahachanafkile. El mahasa went out from somewhere else. The oila prat Naziris. There are Yossi Haglili. So Eima B'nai Yisrael Nazir Naziris oilam. Maybe it's just coming to a B'nai Yisrael's Nazir Naziris oilam. They can make they can say they're a Nazir forever. Ve'enu chachavim Nazir Naziris oilam. Yachal he Nazir Talmud Lemer Ish. Maybe the whole exclusion of Chachamim is that you just can't make themselves into a Nazir oilam. However, maybe a regular Nazir, yes. Rabbi Yocham Yiksiv Nazir oilam. Says the Mafarish, Bikra doesn't say Nazir oilam. If the Ka'amar B'nai Yisrael Nazir Naziris oilam of Chachamim, v'halu Gamri Naziris oilam elam Avshalom. As we saw on Daf Dal in the beginning, the first parak, we only learn out there's a concept of Naziris from the story of Avshalom, who was a Nazir oilam. However, when we're dealing with the regular psukim, you can't say, Pasuk must be talking about a Nazir oilam. No, it's talking about a regular Nazir. So therefore, if it's coming to exclude Chachamim, it's excluding the Nazir, an Chachamim from being a Nazir completely. Eima b'nei Yisrael madirin b'neihem b'nazir, ve'eino Chachamim madirin b'neihem b'nazir. Maybe it just means that we know not only can you make yourself into Nazir, you can also do this for your child. So ve'eino Chachamim madirin b'neihem b'nazir. However, Chachamim cannot make their sons into Nazirim. Yachaloi Nazirim, Talmud Amar Ish. Maybe, okay, a man who's an Avik Chachamim cannot make his son into a Nazir, but he himself could make himself into a Nazir, maybe. So Gemara says, no, you can't say that. Rabbi Yochanan halacha he ben Nazir. He says that it's a halacha ben Nazir. What is that? So if you look in the very bottom, Rabbi Yochanan b'pirkan le'el, as we saw before, halacha he ben Nazir, sha'av mazir as beno ben Nazir. That we know there's a halacha Moshe Messina, that the father has the ability, was a machlokes, it was because of a chinuch, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, it was in Halacha Moshe Sinai, that the father has the ability to be able to make his son into a Nazir. Hoyel, the lav mikra nafka, since that whole drush is not from the pasuk, you can't say, oh, maybe the pasuk is coming to tell you, oh, only a yid can do this, but an Avik Chachamim is not able to make his son into a Nazir. But he can make himself into a Nazir. What do you mean? We don't learn this whole concept out, that a father can make his son into a Nazir from a pasuk. We only learn that from a Halacha Moshe Sinai. Says the Mefarish, "V'asa ish l'rabo," says Avik Chachamim, "B'Nazir atzmo b'lo carbon el dehai d'ksib b'hu Yisrael kamamayit l'benazirus l'gamri." It must be, again, that it's coming to exclude Avik Chachamim completely. Back in the Gemara, maybe it's just come and tell you that Bnei Yisrael will shave on the Nazirus of his father. We said in a situation, it was a machlokes, it was dafka b'moisem, or even b'chayen, in the event that the father died and he left monies, and the son says, Al manas, I will become a nazir that I can use my father's funds that he designated. So he said that it works. So maybe that's only by Yid, but not by Chachavim. So again, maybe another Chachavim could become a Nazir. So again, Ha'itmar Rav Yochanan ben Nazir. Once again, this whole notion of of a son being able to use his father's proceeds, that is also halacha Moshe Sinai. It's not learned from a pasuk. So the fact that we have this pasuk cannot be coming to exclude that dafka from an Avik Chachavim, because the whole drasha that it works for Yisrael is only from a halacha Moshe Sinai. It's not from a pasuk. So what do we do from this pasuk to exclude? It must be we're excluding the Avik Chachavim L'gamri completely, that there's no din nazirus on him at all. Okay. We're going to stop there. Maybe we'll see another question. What Yerusha is not there? So he said he cannot be Yerush to his son Avadim because there's no guf. There's no kinyan of guf. Question 11, we didn't see yet. TA6, we did. TA7 we're going to do tomorrow. TB7, which we only saw half of it. Mahu Chaimer Menaziris Menashim Avadim. Question TB8. Manilmad Mehaksib Be'erchen Ish. The Rabbos Akum Insarch the Yalfinan Mehekesh Linedarim. No, and that will be on tomorrow's daf. Adkan.